What's up, Doc?
Welcome back to my channel. Today we're taking a left turn at Albuquerque. We're flying straight into a hair-raising project inspired by Dave from Dr. Toys. Big thanks to him, and I'll drop a link to his channel in the description below. Now, today's build involves an obscure Blink and You'll Miss It character from the classic 1952 Bugs Bunny cartoon Hare Lift, featuring Yosemite Sam, Bugs, and today's star of the show, the robot pilot. He's only on screen for about half a second, but he's always cracked me up. So strap in, buckle up, and keep your carrots handy because we're about to hit some serious turbulence. Let's go. Before I dive into any build, I always start with a few quick thumbnail sketches. Nothing too detailed, just enough to get a feel for the overall shape and proportions. It's a great way to work out the basic dimensions and jot down some early build notes before moving on to anything more refined. It helps me visualize the project and catch potential issues early on. I start out by trimming the ends of a miniature 12-volt light bulb. Next up, it's time to give our robot pilot some power. I slide a shrink tube over both wire leads, running them all the way down to the battery housing. Once they're in place, I break out the heat gun and shrink the tubing nice and tight, securing both wires together. Now it's time to give our robot some illumination, literally. I apply the same shrink tube technique to the miniature incandescent light bulb, making sure it's sturdy and snug inside. This way, our little guy won't be flickering out mid-flight. Next, it's time to connect the power source to our miniature light bulb. I start by sliding a larger shrink tube over one set of wires, which will keep everything neat and secure. Then, using a heat shrink solder seal wire connector, I join the negative wires together. One of the benefits of using these tiny bulbs is the wire leads have no positive or negative polarity, so it's nearly impossible to get it wrong. Once the wires are twisted together, I use my heat gun to melt the solder and shrink the connection into place. I repeat the same step for the other lead. With both connections secured, I slide the larger shrink tube over everything and shrink it down, giving the bond extra strength and a nice clean finish. With the wiring ready, it's time to test the light. I'll just pop in the 9-volt battery and flip the switch on. Yup, so far so good. Using a full-size printout of our robot pilot and a color reference, I start cutting all the extremities from wooden dowels. Here, I'm tracing the dowels against the drawing, making the most of each piece. This not only ensures accuracy for this build, but also helps save material for future projects. Every little bit counts. Then, I use my Stanley cutter to trim the dowels to the correct lengths. Next, I lay each dowel over the engineering drawing to verify their lengths. This step ensures that every piece matches the design perfectly and gives me a chance to make any small adjustments before moving on. It's a simple check, but it saves a lot of headaches later when everything needs to fit together just right. For the ball joints, I'm using wooden craft balls. I add a drop of glue to one end and tap it into place with a rubber mallet, just enough to hold it snugly without turning it into a demolition project. And here's the head. For the arms, I'll use these smaller wooden balls and attach them just like I did with the head. Glue, tap, and secured. Nice and simple. And here are both arms, ready and waiting for a hand, literally. And here's a look at the hip assembly, all fitted and ready for the next step. To join the polystyrene panels that will form the torso, I'm using Weld-On No. 3 solvent for a strong, seamless bond. I lay out all the polystyrene panels on the table in order, so I know exactly where each piece goes when assembling the torso. To keep the panels perfectly square, I'm using my 1-2-3 blocks. Starting with the front plate, I lay it upside down, then position the left arm panel with the opening facing up and use the solvent to weld the two pieces together. I repeat the process for the upper panel, which will hold the neck and head assembly, making sure all panels stay square and aligned as I go. And here's the front half of the torso. I'll give the edges a quick sand so everything lines up neatly and fits together perfectly. Off camera, I cut 4 wooden blocks that will secure the dowel limbs in place, giving the torso a stronger, more stable structure. Before gluing them in place, it's a good idea to do a dry fit to make sure everything lines up properly. To attach the wood structure panels into the inside of the polystyrene torso, I'll be using Weldwood Contact Cement by DAP. Using an acid brush, coat the interior of the polystyrene torso evenly. Then, apply contact cement to each wood panel where it will contact the torso, and set them aside briefly to let the cement become tacky before bonding everything together. Now that all the panels are tacky, it's time to position each one in its designated spot. I start with the bottom panel, making sure it sits perfectly plumb. Next, I place the top panel the same way. This is followed by the left panel, which will secure the left arm. And finally, the right panel to hold the right arm assembly in place. To finish the torso, I'll use the Weld-On solvent and glue on the open back panel frame, creating a snug slot where the battery housing will slide and nest securely into place. And here's the finished torso, all sanded smooth and ready for the next stage of the build. To make the hook hands for our robot pilot, I trimmed a 60,000th of an inch polystyrene sheet off camera to shape the hooks. To add a bit of realistic detail, I used a rotary hole punch to create faux hardware, mimicking the bolts that would hold the hooks in place. It's a small touch, but it really helps bring the miniature hook hands to life. Here, I'll be using weld-on solvent again to glue both hooks together. For these tiny parts, I rely on my needle tweezers, which make handling small pieces much easier. They're especially handy when positioning and securing the faux hardware, ensuring everything stays perfectly aligned without fumbling or smudging the glue around. To attach the hook hand to the forearm, I carefully use a hacksaw blade to carve a small groove where the hand will slide and lock into place. This step requires a very steady hand and patience. One wrong move, and the entire piece could be ruined. Taking it slow ensures a precise fit and keeps our robot pilot looking sharp and ready for action. To permanently bond the hook hand to the forearm, I'm using a two-step CA glue with a spray activator. I start by placing a single drop of glue into the open cavity of the forearm, then press the hand firmly into place. Once it's set, I give it a quick spray with the activator to lock the joint solid. And just like that, the hook hand is securely attached and ready for action. To replicate the robot pilot's lower left and right knobs, I'm reusing the same dowels I used earlier for the limbs. Because these pieces are so small, the Stanley cutter won't do the job, so I switch over to my X-Acto miter box for precision. I start by trimming a small slice off the end of the dowel to square it off, creating a clean surface to work from. Then I measure and cut off about 3/16 of an inch from the dowel to form one of the knobs. Keeping the cut small and precise ensures the piece matches the scale of the robot and looks proportional once it's attached. To finish the knob, I clean up the cut by sanding the visible side with 200 grit sandpaper. This smooths out any rough edges and gives it a clean finished look once it's in place. To attach both knobs, I'm once again using CA glue. With my needle tweezers, I carefully position each knob in its spot, add a drop of glue, and finish with a quick spray of activator. Just like that, the knobs are locked firmly in place. To simulate the glass-like power dial, I'm using a 1/2-inch diameter googly eye. After trimming the bottom, this is how the googly eye looks now. Using the same method as before, I glue a googly eye into each shoulder slot with weld-on solvent. Once aligned, the googly eyes neatly cover the exposed joints from the removable arms, giving the shoulders a cleaner finish. I'll use 22 gauge wire to make the radio antennas. First, I'll manually drill several openings on the robot's head to secure each radio antenna. Next, I'll trim each wire to size and bend it into that classic ready kilowatt shape. And here's what our robot pilot's head looks like with the 5 temporary signal antennas in place to test the fit. Off camera, I trimmed a 3/4 inch dowel to form both kneecaps. To join the femur to the kneecap, I'll use glue, ensuring a snug fit and cleaning up any excess. Then I'll repeat the same step for the other side. Now I'll attach each tibia to the knees the same way as before, cleaning up any excess glue as I go. To sculpt each foot, I first printed a full-size drawing and carefully trimmed it with my X-Acto knife. Next, I'll transfer that cutout onto the wood, which will serve as a precise template for trimming the pieces on my bandsaw. This ensures each foot matches the intended shape and scale. With the top and side images transferred, I can shape the wood block to match the design. I start by cutting away the excess wood from each foot, carefully following the contours. A slow and steady approach is key when working with small pieces like these. Once each foot is separated, I refine it into a tapered shape, reminiscent of that classic Bugs Bunny style. The final cuts shape the front of the toes, giving the feet their finished cartoonish look. Here's what the rough cut foot looks like. Next, it's time for sanding. After plenty of sanding and reshaping with different grits of sandpaper, here's what the foot looks like now. With both feet glued into position, here's the completed lower half of our robot pilot. With the robot pilot nearly complete, I switch gears and turn to the plane's interior. I trim each panel from 1/100,000th of an inch polystyrene, scoring lightly at first and deepening the cuts until I can snap out custom panels for the scene's backdrop.
Many unbearable hours later.
And here are all the panels, carefully cut and ready to be installed as the plane's interior background. First, I start on the plane's outer skin. I place the door cutout to fill the void and maintain consistent spacing, then align the door frame around the perimeter. To keep it steady, I use my 1-2-3 blocks and then dab the brush into the solvent. Capillary action will securely bond the frame to the main structure. I repeat the same process for the other side. Then I remove the 1-2-3 blocks and spacer to reveal the finished door frame. For the door rivets, I'm using small googly eyes, an easy way to add realistic detail. Using the bottom of a soda can, I pour in some solvent. Then I lay out the googly eyes on my work surface, ready to attach them to the door frame. Now that I learned the hard way from my previous mistake, I placed a single row along the edge of the door and got into a good rhythm of pick, dab, and glue, like a laser-focused craftsman at work. Now I'm finally in the home stretch. Just a couple more to go before moving on to the next step. And here's the final result, with all the door rivets in place. Looks riveting, right? Off camera, I made a jig from rigid insulation and foam core to serve as the foundation for the plane's curved surface. You'll notice the polystyrene sheet has pencil markings showing where each bulkhead will be positioned. Here's the right side of the door fuselage frame, showing the bulkhead with stringers attached. To attach that assembly to the interior fuselage skin, I use CA glue. I apply a small bead along the preset pencil lines, then align the bulkhead and press it into position. Once in place, I set it with a quick spray of activator. And here's the assembled bulkhead in place. Now, on to the next one. This intricate structure, which took many hours to fabricate by hand, is designed to securely house the parachutes and ensure they fit perfectly within the plane. With a steady hand and a bit of luck, I carefully lay beads of CA glue along the inside surface of the fuselage's inner skin. making sure each bead is precise and even. The pencil lines serve as an essential guide, keeping the bulkheads properly aligned as I work. Without these guides, I'd be flying blind, and a single misplaced piece could throw off the entire structure. This step requires patience and focus, but it's critical to ensure the fuselage maintains its correct shape and supports the parachute compartment perfectly. And here are both bulkhead modules, firmly attached to the inner fuselage skin. On the outside of the plane, I added the door frame along with even more rivets for detail. Now it's time to attach the fuselage wall to the floor structure. Luckily, the pencil guides make alignment much easier. Starting from the left side of the floor, I lay a bead of CA glue along the edge, following the pencil line guide. Then I align the closet where our robot pilot was housed over the guides and press it firmly into place. To secure the bond, I spray the CA glue accelerator and voila! Here, I'm applying the final bead of CA glue to the first bulkhead in the right corner and carefully aligning it into position. Turning back to the robot pilot, I mark the location of his feet on the floor with a marker, which will later be drilled out. I use a center punch to create a small divot on each of the floor markings. Then, carefully using my cordless drill, I make the holes, taking care not to tear through the material. You'll notice that one hole is straight while the other is angled. This ensures proper alignment with the robot pilot's foot pins. Now it's time for the parachutes. I trimmed faux leather into 2 equal strips. Then cut brown felt for the parachute housing. And finally shaped a foam sheet to form the overall structure. Lastly, you have the finished parachute, fully assembled and ready for our friend to wear, including the shoulder straps. I gathered all the parts and did a dry fit for our robot pilot to ensure everything fits correctly before moving forward. So far, so good. To prime the robot's parts, I'm using Rust-Oleum's professional fast-drying spray primer. It is crucial to wear a respirator for this step and apply even coats to avoid any drips.
3 days later.
Once the primer has fully cured, it's time to give the robot pilot his final top coat. I'm using Rust-Oleum Slate Gray, and again, it's important to wear a respirator and apply even coats to avoid any uneven finishes.
Several days later.
After several days of curing, we can begin adding the finishing touches to our robot pilot. First up is the parachute's belt. You'll notice the unique detail featured on the belt, as seen in this cartoon still. And here is the final belt, cut from the same faux leather we used earlier. These are the graphics I'll be using. I tried to match the colors and fonts as closely as possible to mimic the original scene. You'll notice the voltage gauge is made by none other than Acme gauges, a little homage to the legacy of this classic cartoon. I'll start with the voltage gauge, attaching it to the robot's upper left torso. Off camera, I spray painted the 5 antennas with gloss gold paint. After gluing them in place with CA glue, here's what the head looks like with the antennas permanently attached. To attach the light bulb, I applied double-sided tape inside the assembly and press-fitted it into the torso wall. Here's what the light bulb looks like after it's attached. I slide and tuck the battery housing inside the torso cavity, then hide the wires alongside it. Let's see if it works. Power on. Success! To attach the clear googly eye that simulates the glass cover for the Acme gauge, I'll be using Tester's Clear Parts Cement. I'll squeeze out a small drop of glue onto a plastic lid, then, using angled tweezers, carefully pick up the googly eye cover and gently dip it into the adhesive, making sure to coat the perimeter evenly for a secure, invisible bond. With a steady hand, I hover the googly eye over the gauge, gently lower it into position, and press it into place. Once secured, I carefully wipe away any excess glue. Here's the finished torso, now complete with the Acme gauge and the light bulb securely in place. Well, good news and bad news. Good news first. The clear bubbles stayed perfectly secured. The bad news? The glue seeped into the printed Acme dial, leaving it a bit discolored. Luckily, it still looks pretty good from a distance, so I'll call that a small win. Off camera, I primed the entire aircraft section using Rust-Oleum's professional fast-drying spray primer, just like before. With the gray primer in place, the interior really takes on the look of a C-17 Globemaster, don't you think? I'll set this aside to cure for a couple of days before moving on to the silver exterior finish, which will help mimic the plane's aluminum skin.
1 day later.
The next day after the primer had been fully dried, I used bright shiny silver for the outer skin, also by Rust-Oleum. When applying the silver spray paint, it's best to go lightly. 3 thin coats are always better than 1 heavy coat. The paint will go on smoother, prevent runs, and give you a far more professional finish. Be patient and allow at least 20 minutes of drying time between each pass for the best results.
1 eternity later.
With the silver top coat finally cured, I'll be applying Krylon Color Max Paint Plus Primer in Satin Italian Olive to the interior. Off camera, I masked the silver exterior with painter's tape to protect it from overspray. To mimic the olive drab color from the cartoon, I chose the closest paint match I could find. Be sure to cover every nook and crevice, applying thin coats instead of 1 heavy pass. This approach ensures a smoother finish, prevents runs, and delivers a much more professional finish. Now I'll attach the lower half of the star of the show to the base using CA glue and spray activator. All that's left is to carefully attach the upper half of our robot pilot, and this build will be complete. And there you have it, the infamous robot pilot who in times of peril, instead of saving the day, he ends up saving himself. If you enjoyed this build and want to help support the channel, head over to my Etsy shop at toyandpropmasters.etsy.com. You'll find unique handcrafted props, rare collectible toys, and antiques of all kinds that are perfect for fans, collectors, and anyone looking for something truly unique. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, comment, and share it with fellow fans. Once more, I'd like to thank Dave from Dr. Toys for this inspiration. Thanks again for watching, and that's all, folks.